There is a strict sequence to human history. First, we figure out basic survival. Then we discover farming to settle into permanent villages. Those villages grow, requiring kings for order, and eventually society organizes religion to build massive monuments. This is the baseline. We all learned this exact progression in school, and it forms the foundation of how we understand our own development as a species. But then a bulldozer blade strikes something hard in the dirt, or a researcher points a laser through a jungle canopy, and the physical evidence completely breaks the timeline. The ancient societies being pulled out of the ground did not follow the foundational rules of history that modern academics wrote for them. The textbook story of human development is not slightly off. The dirt suggests we have the entire sequence backward. According to the established rules, if you want to build a sprawling, standardized city, you need a centralized ruler or a spate apparatus to force thousands of people to follow the same blueprint. Then we look at Mohenjo-Daro. This is a massive, planned city in the Indus Valley, roughly 4,500 years old, built to house 40,000 people. Look closely at this stone-lined drainage channel. The urban sanitation here included private homes with individual wells and indoor bathrooms connected to a covered sewage system beneath the streets. The builders were incredibly precise. Across the entire civilization, spanning 1,000 kilometers, the bricks maintain a mathematically exact 1-to-2 ratio of length to width. Yet after a century of digging across an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, archaeologists have found zero evidence of a royal class. No palaces, no temples, no royal tombs, and no evidence of an army. Millions of people lived together, standardized their engineering across huge distances, and maintained that complex urban system for roughly 700 years, completely without autocratic rule. The next established rule is geographical. Advanced civilizations require temperate, forgiving environments to thrive. A dense, nutrient-poor jungle is too hostile to support massive urban populations. In 1542, the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana sailed down the Amazon and reported seeing massive cities along the riverbanks. European historians dismissed his journals as fantasy. They assumed the rainforest was an untouched, empty wilderness. Centuries later, laser scanning peeled back the canopy, proving Orellana right. The jungle hid a massive urban network. In Bolivia and Ecuador, archaeologists mapped thousands of engineered structures, pyramids reaching 22 meters, and straight causeways connecting settlements across 300 kilometers, housing tens of thousands. The forest looked empty to European colonists a generation later because imported diseases had already traveled ahead of them along the trade routes, wiping out the inhabitants before they could be documented. The Amazon was never a barrier to civilization. The forest itself was a carefully cultivated landscape, managed and engineered by human hands over millennia. But the most severe break in the historical record happens when we travel back 12,000 years to a hilltop in southern Turkey. This is Göbekli Tepe. It is a massive complex of circular enclosures built entirely by nomadic hunter-gatherers, a group of people that every textbook said lacked the social complexity to organize permanent construction. The builders quarried, moved, and erected limestone pillars weighing over 15 tons. They carved complex reliefs of foxes, vultures, and scorpions into the stone. They managed this massive engineering project before humanity had invented agriculture, wheels, pottery, or metal. The logistics required to pull this off are staggering. Moving a single 15-ton pillar from the quarry requires a coordinated workforce of at least 500 people. Keeping them fed during construction requires advanced food management, previously associated only with farming societies. Göbekli Tepe proves that a society does not need to master survival and settle into agricultural villages before it can build massive monuments. The physical evidence points to a completely inverted sequence of human history. Religion did not emerge as a byproduct of a civilized, settled society. Civilization emerged as a byproduct of religion. Ancient hunter-gatherers looked at a hilltop and decided they needed a sacred space. That sheer desire forced them to invent the logistics, the organized labor, and the early food management systems necessary to keep the builders fed.
And then comes the final twist.
After completing the most labor-intensive construction in human history, the builders intentionally filled the enclosures with rubble, completely buried the site under tons of earth, and walked away. We forced our ancestors into a rigid timeline that assumed they were simple. The physical record shows they were highly capable, incredibly experimental, and perfectly willing to ignore the rules we tried to write for them. Our history books are incomplete, and the next discovery that redefines exactly what humans can do is likely sitting right now under a hill that someone walks over every single day.